We are preparing, for starters, for the next tariff determination period, what is called now MYPD4. What we wanted to do, we wanted to ensure that the lessons that we have learnt in the MYPD3, its implementation, and the things that need to be changed and strengthened so as to provide a conducive environment for Eskom to get the tariffs they require, but also to ensure that they operate efficiently and ensure that your consumers don't pay for what they don't need to pay for. We have seen that it was necessary. In fact, in all of our public consultations, we got the inputs from people that then you need to review the methodology if this is what it's saying. So it's really the normal review that we would have had, but I think what's different with this review is that it is touching quite a number of areas. I think around the coal, the usage of coal and the reward for Eskom for coal, the efficiency around the procurement and the usage of coal. I think the ones around open cycle gas turbines, we accept that they are also in line with what we have to look at, and I think the forecasting is also another one where we say that the risk of forecasting mustn't just be carried by the customer. So the bigger part of this is to say, let's now start apportioning the risks and make those who can better mitigate them be responsible for them, rather than just assuming that the customer will, at the end of it all, pay for things that they had no control over. We plan, I think there's been suggestions by many of the people who are there to say that before we approve, can we have workshops? So I think we are going to, and when we have developed the first one, we had workshops and with the different stakeholders, got their different viewpoints, and in most cases, like you find in these things, that you must find some consensus, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the view of Eskom only or the view of industry only, but something that's in between. We plan to do that, so over the next 2-3 months we would probably conduct those workshops and then make the decision later, because we would want Eskom to make their MYPD4 application based on the methodology or the rules that we would have approved now.
I think our main message to the regulator was that the regulatory mechanism is quite complicated, and we really wanted to request additional time to consult on some of the more in-depth topics, especially around coal costs and sale forecasting. And I hope we had a chance to convince the regulator to look into that and allow stakeholders this additional time. It was supported by some of the other presenters, and we think we have a good opportunity to buy that additional 2 to 3 months to finalize this methodology, because it has such significant impacts on the consumer and the industry going forward. I think from an Eskom perspective, especially based on the recent history, there is a need to understand a bit more detail around information, but we as Eskom believe you regulate our allowed revenue and our tariffs, and then within those mechanisms and targets that are set, you allow the utility and Eskom to deliver in terms of their license conditions.
My background is mainly financial, quantity surveying, bit of economics, studying financial markets, and working at the DBSA for 29 years, where I got a huge interest in terms of these aspects. As a member of the public, I'm also affected, and it doesn't help always just complaining about situations. I believe the principle to complain, you must also use the opportunities that you have as far as possible, and this is not the only one where I made some inputs, although I'm not being paid for it. I believe in the principle, and I believe I have something to add. The reason is because if I look at the scenario of Eskom, it's quite extraordinary, out of the normal features that you find in the market with regard to a company that is well run as such that, because their debt is at the moment excessive, and the fact that they can't have a debt service coverage ratio of 0.82, which implies that they can't even service debt properly, and also the debt is more than 2 times the total revenue, says to you there is danger in what we are doing, and something must be done to get it into a framework that says to manage it out of this predicament, because at the moment it's quite clearly that the formula is not giving the answers if you look at the result of the figures that I've tried to show up in this, and that they have expended more than 400 billion, but the gigawatt generation of electricity have almost remained the same. The only thing that went up is the tariff line. And the same goes for coal, that has also remained more or less the same. But I think the only way to work us out is by having discussions and suggestions like work forums and so on, to work out these sort of things that we come to grips, because we can't wish it away, we have to manage it out over time. I don't think it's at the moment enough, because the MIT methodology, for instance, and this is where I have serious reservations, in that if you look at the MIT, for instance, it assumes over 4% GDP growth over time, which didn't materialize. If you look at the present scenario, South Africa is almost at 0.6%, and unlikely next year to go more than 1%. Also, and it gives this background where if you make assumptions, you have to make sure what is your reasoning, and you must be able to adjust if necessary. But why they made the assumptions of 4%, it's one thing that I could never understand, because I think it was obvious after the 2008-9 global crisis that there was a huge challenge. You wouldn't achieve all your sales targets and all those sort of things. Not really, if you don't look at framework with specific pointers in place, so that your debt to total revenue is, for instance, let's say not more than 50% of total revenue, and so on, and trying to bring that ratio down to a more sustainable situation. Because if you look at Eskom, even its ratings from the international rating agencies is saying it's not making investment grade. And as a standalone, it should be at least being able to operate like a private sector multinational company, being sustainable on its own legs, and it can't be sustainable without government support at the moment.